So is Nike just not trying to make better shoes anymore? I mean, it's not hard to see that the tide is shifting in the performance shoe industry, with smaller brands making bigger investments in performance shoe tech, and honestly bigger impacts in terms of sales. Thing is, Nike still is the unquestionable leader even in that ridiculously crowded market. And they're doing so while seemingly falling behind in the shoe tech race, opting for older technology and producing what many believe to be inferior shoes to their competition now. But are they really inferior? Really? Or do they just see something that most of us don't? So for as long as I can remember at least, Nike has been the absolute sharpest edge of the knife in terms of pushing performance shoe innovation. You or me may not have liked an individual shoe that they would have come out with, but most of the time you could at least respect the effort and the idea. I mean, it's become so commonplace, people tend to forget how nuts of a concept Zoom Air was when it came out. I mean, forget Zoom Air, how about just regular Nike Air back in the mid-80s? Nobody was even close to that at the time. And how about things like Foamposite, a molded upper material with so much protection and containment envisioned from a beetle shell? Or how about Flight Carbon? Or how about hard shell Pebex or Pebex, whatever you want to call it, lateral containers on shoes? You realize that Nike figured out that the same Pebex in medical tubing, because that's what it was originally designed for, could be used for resilient, lightweight lateral containment in shoes, but also that it made this earth-shatteringly bouncy and resilient midsole shoe foam and implemented both iterations of that same chemical compound near perfect. And over the years, we've seen Nike push and push and push the bounds of shoe gear, much like Apple pushed the boundaries of what, a phone could be. But then Nike has run into the same problem a lot of industries run into after a while. And it's not really even a problem, it actually more now could be seen as an opportunity in their eyes, and they're taking advantage of diminishing returns on innovation. Because Nike's pushed the industry so far, so relatively fast, it just gets hard to keep one-upping yourself, and then you start to just hit these plateaus, where it's just more subtle evolution in tech rather than revolution. And just to kind of contradict myself, like that's all well and good, that actually doesn't answer the question as to why other smaller companies are using more premium foams, rubbers, upper materials versus Nike, which seem to be going back to using a lot of relatively just basic ingredients in their shoes. Well, at least to me, there's a few reasons for this. Some clinical and some economical. Let's start from the material science perspective first. Now, one of the big complaints in terms of court shoes, basketball, tennis, volleyball, pickleball, is that while Nike pioneered many of today's most advanced midsole foams, they now choose to rely on decades-old midsole tech in most of their shoes versus other companies who are actively developing and implementing brand new innovative compounds for their midsoles. And yeah, I mean, it really makes you do a double take when Nike, say, debuts a new shoe line or maybe comes out with a 22nd iteration of another, and you look and it's got Cushlon foam in it, which is a relatively old EVA blend. Yeah, I mean, it's been tuned here or there, to just make it softer, but then you get competitors' shoes for the same price with some newly tuned thermoplastic concoction with these crazy bounce stats, it's super light and everything else, and you're wondering, once again, what am I missing here? Well, what you and me, what we're missing is the complete snapshot of the larger buying audience. Because believe it or not, people watching this video are probably not Nike's target demographic. Which I know sounds stupid, but hear me out. Because people like you and me look at articles like these that showed newer thermoplastic foams, which coincidentally Nike pioneered and are now being used by so many of their competitors in the court shoe space, resulted in a 10% increase in compression and bending energy return versus EVA, which is used in now most Nike tennis, basketball, and volleyball shoes. There's also this study right here that found that not only new thermoplastics not only outperform EVA when they're new, but also its performance is more durable over the life of the shoe. Basically, in every performance metric these studies look at, the newer thermoplastics just flat out outperform EVA. So after seeing these really recent studies and seeing their evidence, figure it's just laziness and greed on Nike's part that they only use their most advanced thermoplastics in their running shoes, maybe one or two court shoes, right? Well, here's the thing, once you look a little bit deeper into those studies. The studies were all done looking at running, consistent patterns of strike over a longer period of time in mostly one direction. It's pretty controlled. Court sports like tennis and basketball are non-uniform sports. Every movement is different. There's just as much side-to-side motion as front to back, and different parts of the shoe come under stress at different and unexpected times. And while yeah, court sports, they do require more explosive movement, quicker bursts of energy, there's also just a lot more standing around versus something consistent like running or walking. So what does that mean for this particular debate? Well, firstly, EVA versus thermoplastics. EVA is dull, it's muted, it's muffled, which all sound like bad things, but in terms of court sports, it's kind of perfect. It means your feet can feel the court through the shoe better and that the shoe stays more stable through non-uniform movements. In fact, even the people concluding that thermoplastics are more advanced admit in the studies that the bounce thermoplastics creates can make the shoe more unstable and more unpredictable. And another thing that these experts have found that have done these studies is that, and probably the most important thing they've found, is that these gains in compression force, energy return, things like that between the more super premium foams and the more stock EVAs, they really don't matter for non-elite runners. They weren't found to be significant, give significant gains for people who were not elite runners. And there's that word again, runners. These haven't been found to have those types of effects on other sports. So as long as the shoe is, I keep saying, quote unquote, good enough, the gains that you get from these more super premium foams can just get washed out by the skill of the player because the force being put into the shoe through court sports just sometimes is too much for those little gains in terms of foam engineering to make that much of a difference. It might make a big difference between the ears because you feel something different underfoot and you feel that little bit of bounce, and so you feel better, so you play better, but that is a lot more psychological benefit. So besides the psychological benefit, the gains that you're feeling with those foams might not actually be doing anything besides making you feel better, which obviously could be a huge boost, but also the comfort you feel underfoot might also be enough to give you that boost, which Nike seems to be banking on, that their shoes are comfortable enough that you will get that boost from the aesthetics and the comfort. And that also leads right into another point. Nike's whole essence is based on air. And so you stick a tensile air unit in a small part of the shoe, then it starts feeling bouncier like the thermoplastics, but it also doesn't buckle in on itself when you push hard side to side. And do you know which material is also the easiest to bond to, those air units, and also sculpt around the different shape of those air units? EVA. And because EVA is so stable and tailored more toward court sports, and you can formulate it to make, super soft and plush foams, you can now stick this in shoes, make them feel just as comfy as a thermoplastic with more stability, and for a lower price to manufacture, especially for a company as big as Nike, with these huge supply chains built around their EVA molds, especially EVA plus air molds, or older foams like React. And that quip about supply chains really brings me to the other reason they're not trying to make better shoes. And that's consumer priorities and economics. Right now, Nike seems to be just prioritizing comfort and superficial design. They are relying on good aesthetics, colorways, and athletes to move product. And coincidentally, that's also another reason why EVA is used so much, because it takes color really well and you can sculpt the outside carrier foams of a shoe to make, more interesting shapes and more aesthetic shapes. And if you've been paying attention at all over the last few minutes, you're probably starting to say to yourself, there it is. Nike's real target demographic, comfort and aesthetic buyers. What Nike knows that some others don't is that what people say they want and what they will actually buy can be completely different things. As long as the shoe is stable enough, performs well enough, most potential buyers will go for comfort and looks, especially because of Nike's reputation over the decades. People see the swoosh and just assume it's good. So like I said, most people only care about what does it feel like, what does it look like. That's it. Even a lot of top athletes think like this. And honestly, it's not wrong to think this way, because even with all the newer materials and innovations, there's only so much a shoe can do, and at times when you veer out of your lane and design something just for the sake of using a certain product, like Nike's Zoom X thermoplastic, which is so effective in running shoes, they tried to use it in the Jordan 39 and 40, you can actually end up with an inferior product that cost you way more to manufacture because you just felt the pressure to use a certain material for the sake of using it. And if I'm being honest, I am constantly shocked at how much I like Nike's more basic shoes compared to the science projects of other companies. Maybe a lot of those Nike shoes aren't as advanced right now, but they're good enough, and as long as the shoe isn't causing harm, like increasing injury potential, then And that's not a blanket statement. I mean, Nike does make some clunkers that, I don't recommend to patients, right? Like I think, actually do have some issues. The issue becomes, or if you're making so many of them and if you're flooding the market with a ton of more basic model shoes, that's when I think the argument that Nike should make less shoes and make them higher quality, that's where I start to see that argument being, yeah, I definitely agree with that. The one thing I have seen recently with some Nikes though, which I don't have a good explanation for, is the lack of midfoot shanks in a lot of their court shoes that really need them, especially the recent Jordans. And just some cheaper or less than ideal upper materials, especially given what Nike has in their vault in terms of material science, especially in the uppers. I mean, if no one but us, which is a relatively small group compared to their larger buying audience, cares about some newer advanced material, and if what they already have in their manufacturing pipeline is good enough, then in their eyes, it's probably better to spend the money coming up with more unique colorways and silhouettes that end up getting them free marketing instead. Just look at what happened recently. Nike debuted a bunch of new shoes, none of which are anything groundbreaking in terms of advanced materials, and the internet went bananas. Why? Because they all looked cool. And when you're a company as big as Nike with the overhead Nike has, you're basically making, it's like $5 per shoe, maybe a little bit more if you're selling them wholesale. Hype marketing and social strategies are gonna probably net you more profit on more basic bone shoes versus spending that money going crazy on tech. Remember, Nike is a huge company, and that's all well and good, but the more people you gotta pay, the more people you gotta answer to, the more you have to make that $5 you make per shoe stretch. Now, obviously the running space for Nike is a bit of a different beast. In that aspect, they are really still largely the industry leader in innovation as well as sales. And that's because that's where most of the money is, in shoes. And that's also where the stats are most important. In court sports, you measure so many different variables. In running, it's time. And if you can say a certain tech can lower that time, make you faster, that impact is so far greater than with other sports. And yeah, Nike has gone through some pains recently, both with sales, stock price, leadership changes, but they're still unquestionably the industry leader. Now, does that start to change if the market starts prioritizing different things? Maybe. I mean, nothing lasts forever, but I think it's gonna take like the next great leap in shoe tech to do it. And what that looks like, who knows? You know what? Maybe Nike will invent it. But of course, Nike doesn't just put EVA in their court shoes. They do have a stable of some other foams, all with their own pros and cons. And if you do want to take a deep dive into those foams and all the other bleeding edge midsole foams available to you, check out this video right here that breaks down all of them so you can get more info on which one may be the best for your particular needs. I'll see you in that video.